Nino and the Whispering Socks. Summary. Every night, Nino's mismatched socks begin to whisper stories from the places they've been before finding him. One sock used to dance in a circus, the other trekked snowy mountains. But when Nino loses one, he learns to listen more carefully, not just to socks, but to people too. Moral: everyone and everything has a story worth hearing if you take time to listen. Segment 1. The Quiet Boy with Loud Socks. In a small town wrapped in the softness of misty mornings and warm yellow lamplight, there lived a boy named Nino. He was 7 years old, with gentle eyes the color of tree bark after the rain and hair that curled like question marks above his forehead. He didn't talk much, not because he couldn't, but because he preferred to listen. Nino lived in a tall, narrow house that always smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. His room sat under the slanted attic roof, where moonlight spilled in through a round window and painted silver paths across the wooden floor at night. Shelves lined the walls, filled with rocks shaped like clouds, a music box with a broken dancer, and of course, his socks. Nino had a lot of socks. Striped ones, spotted ones, socks with stars, or little stitched foxes. But none of them matched. That's because Nino only wore mismatched socks on purpose. He said they told better stories that way, though no one quite knew what that meant. His classmates found him odd. He didn't mind. Grown-ups called him a dreamy sort of child and left him to his quiet. But Nino's silence wasn't empty. It was full of listening. To creaking floorboards, humming pipes, the flutter of curtain lace, and lately, to something strange. Because ever since last Tuesday, just as he drifted off to sleep, Nino began to hear his socks whisper. And they had a lot to say. Segment 2. The First Whisper. It began on a night when the rain danced softly against the attic window. Nino was tucked beneath his favorite quilt, the one his grandma had sewn with patches of old shirts and warm colors. His mismatched socks peeked out from beneath the blanket. One was blue with tiny white stars, the other red with a fraying stripe near the toe. He had nearly fallen asleep when he heard it. A whisper. At first, Nino thought it was the wind slipping under the windowsill. But the whisper was too close. It came from the foot of his bed. From his socks. He held his breath. "Do you hear it too?" The red sock murmured, its voice as scratchy as an old record. "The rain?" Nino whispered back, wide-eyed. "No," said the blue sock, in a softer, breezier tone. "The mountains. I used to hear snow fall like this." Nino sat up slowly, his heart tickling his ribs like a feather. He pulled his feet close and stared at the socks. "You can talk?" he asked, not quite sure if he was dreaming. The red sock gave a tiny wiggle. "We've always been able to. You just started listening." That made Nino blink. I didn't know socks could have stories." "Oh, we do," the blue sock said. "You only have to ask." Outside, the rain tapped gently against the roof. But inside, Nino's room was filled with a strange warmth of wonder, the kind that makes your toes feel like they've stepped into starlight. Tonight, he was going to hear his sock stories. Segment 3. The Sock Who Danced. Nino's fingers gently curled around his ankles as he leaned forward, eyes wide. The red sock gave a tiny stretch, like it was preparing for something grand. "I was once the star of the Great Tumbleton Circus," the red sock declared, with a touch of pride. "Back then, I wasn't old and frayed. I was bright, bold, and shimmered in the spotlight." Nino's mouth opened slightly. "You were in a circus?" "Oh yes," said the sock, puffing itself out as much as cotton can. "My human was a dancer. a child performer who tumbled, twirled, and leapt through the air like a feather in the wind. I was part of every move, spinning on toes, sliding across sawdust-covered stages. Nino closed his eyes, and suddenly, he could see it. A big striped tent under a starry sky. Lights glowing like fireflies. A girl in a glittering costume soared through the air in a swirl of red and gold, and on her feet, there was the sock. His sock. I remember the crowd. The red sock whispered, as if it were speaking to itself now. Their gasps, their claps. I was always a little too loose at the heel, but she said I made her feel like flying. Nino's room was quiet, almost reverent. "You must have been brave," he said softly. The red sock gave a tired little twitch. Maybe. Or maybe we were just young. Nino didn't say anything, but he held his feet closer, like he didn't want the memory to float away. Segment 4. The sock of snow and silence. The red sock fell silent, perhaps reliving its days under the circus tent. Nino's toes tingled slightly as the blue sock gave a soft, shivery sigh. "My story's quieter," it said, almost like a breath, but cold and beautiful, like the wind that sings through tall pine trees. Nino turned his gaze to the blue sock, his curiosity blooming. "Where were you?" "In the north," it answered, "far beyond the towns and roads. My person was a hiker. He wore a big coat with fur at the edges and a backpack that creaked when he walked. I was knitted by his grandmother, from special wool dyed with blueberry and sky." Nino imagined vast white landscapes, mountains standing like frozen giants, a man with gentle eyes, walking through snow deeper than a bed, his breath misting in front of him, each step silent and sure. I saw ice that glowed green from beneath, stars that felt close enough to touch, the blue sock whispered. And once, we crossed a frozen lake at dawn. It was so quiet, we could hear the sun rise. Nino shivered, not from cold, but from awe. He had never been anywhere like that, not even in his dreams. "Did you ever get scared?" he asked. The blue sock paused. "Sometimes. But we always made it back. And every night, he would take me off, dry me near the fire, and whisper, 'Thanks for keeping me warm.'" Nino smiled. His heart felt like a fireplace, glowing gently in the dark. Segment 5. A world beneath the quilt. Nino lay back against his pillow, cradling the whispered tales in his mind like treasured marbles. The quilt tucked around him now felt heavier, not from weight, but from the quiet importance of the stories hidden underneath it. The socks had grown still. Their voices faded into the hum of the night, like lullabies winding down. Nino didn't speak right away. He let the silence stretch out, soft and comforting, like the pause between verses in a song. Then he whispered, "Do all socks have stories?" A brief hush. Then the red sock replied, "Every sock remembers where it's been. Some have only warmed feet on rainy mornings, some have climbed mountains, danced across polished floors, or even tiptoed through mischief." The blue sock added, "But not all are listened to." That thought sat heavily in Nino's chest. How many quiet things had he never thought to ask? His jacket, his shoelaces, even the button on his backpack, had they all once lived different lives? "I want to hear more," he said softly. The socks seemed pleased. A breeze curled through the window, rustling the curtain like a turning page. "Then you must take care of your socks," said the blue one. "Keep them together. Wash them gently. Don't lose them under the bed." "Especially not under the bed," added the red sock with a shiver. "It's full of forgotten dreams down there." Nino giggled. Outside, the wind whispered through the leaves. Inside, his room had become a world where the smallest things held the greatest adventures. Segment 6. The Sock Drawer Pact. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the attic window in golden stripes, gently nudging Nino awake. He blinked at the ceiling, wondering if last night had only been a dream. But as he wiggled his toes under the quilt, he felt a faint squeeze, like a tiny hug from each sock. They remembered. He sat up and looked at the wooden chest near the window, his sock drawer. It was old, with a brass handle and a creak that sang each time it opened. Inside, it was chaos, socks of every color and pattern jumbled together, twisted and lost, many without pairs. Nino knelt beside it and slowly began to sort. One by one, he lifted socks and held them gently in his hands, as if listening. Some were quiet, others shy. A few had a whisper of a whisper, like faraway memories too faint to catch. He folded each one with care and made tiny bundles, pairs, even when mismatched. He paused when he came across a faded green sock with a stitched moon near the toe. It was very thin and missing its partner. He held it close to his ear. Nothing. He placed it gently in the waiting pile. When he was done, he looked at the neat little rows in his drawer and smiled. The socks looked peaceful, like old friends resting after long journeys. He whispered, "Thank you." From somewhere deep in the drawer, there came the faintest reply. "You're listening. That's enough." And so, Nino made a promise. He would always care for his socks. He called it the Sock Drawer Pact. It would not be the last promise he made. Segment 7. The School of Unspoken Things. Later that day, Nino walked to school beneath a sky stitched with slow-moving clouds. His socks, mismatched as always, felt especially snug. On his left, the red circus sock with a tiny patch near the heel. On his right, the snowy blue one, still carrying the hush of northern winds. As he walked, he wondered, if socks could whisper, what else might? The playground buzzed with morning chatter. Kids shouting, balls bouncing, zippers zipping. Nino, as usual, kept to the edge. He wasn't lonely exactly, but he often felt like he lived on the other side of a window, always looking in. Today, though, something felt different. He noticed how Carla's shoes squeaked like uncertain questions, how Leo's backpack straps drooped like tired arms, how Mila's braids swayed behind her like a skipping rope that had forgotten its rhythm. Were they whispering too? In class, as Miss Alder wrote math problems on the board, Nino glanced at the boy beside him. Jude, the loud one with scuffed boots and scraped elbows. Jude always fidgeted, always talked during quiet time. But today, Nino noticed something else. Jude's shoelaces were tied too tightly. His socks, Nino caught a glimpse, had holes near the toes. Maybe no one's listening to them either, Nino thought. And then a small idea crept in. Maybe people had quiet stories too. Stories like his socks, worn, wonderful, waiting. Maybe listening wasn't just for bedtime. Maybe it belonged everywhere. Segment 8. A tear and a thought. That afternoon, as the class spilled outside for recess, Nino stayed back for a moment, slowly sliding his notebook into his backpack. He glanced again at Jude, who was stomping toward the door, loud as always. But Nino saw something no one else did. A single sleeve pulled down longer than the other. A quick swipe under the eye when no one was looking. And then a sound, not from the socks, not from the wind, but from somewhere inside Nino. A small, nudging thought. Ask. He didn't. Not yet. But he followed Jude outside, and sat on the edge of the sandbox instead of under his usual tree. That was new. The wind tugged gently at his hair, as if whispering, "Go on." So he waited for Jude to run by again, chasing the soccer ball. When Jude paused to tie his shoe, grumbling at the laces, Nino spoke. "I like your socks." Jude looked up, squinting. "Huh, they look like they've been on adventures," Nino said. Jude blinked, caught off guard. Then he glanced at his feet. "They're just old. Old means stories," Nino said simply. Jude tilted his head. "You're weird." "I know." There was a pause. Then Jude snorted, not unkindly. "They did slide across Grandma's kitchen floor once. I fell into the fridge." Nino smiled. For the first time that day, Jude smiled back. And in the quiet between them, Nino felt it. Not the voice of a sock, but something just as important. A beginning. Segment 9. A sock missing, a silence growing. That night, as stars blinked above the town and the moon painted silver puddles on his bedroom floor, Nino tugged off his shoes and sighed with a happy tiredness. His mismatched socks, now a little dustier than before, had survived another day of secrets and soccer balls. He flopped onto his bed, stretching his arms and legs with a yawn. Then, with sleepy fingers, he reached to pull off his socks. First the red one. But the blue one was gone. He sat up, blinking. He checked under the blanket. No sock. He dropped to the floor. Nothing. He checked inside the shoes, under the bed, even behind the bookshelf. Still nothing. The blue sock, the one that whispered of snow, stars, and silent mountains, was missing. Panic didn't hit all at once. It came like a slow fog, curling in around Nino's chest. He sat on the floor, hugging the red sock to his chest. "Where are you?" he whispered, voice shaky. The red sock stayed still in his hand. Quiet. "I didn't mean to lose you," Nino murmured, eyes beginning to sting. "I wanted to hear more. You still had stories." The room was silent. The kind of silence that used to feel like wonder, but now felt like something had gone wrong in the magic. That night, Nino curled up with just one sock. It was warm, but not warm enough. He dreamed of snow that never spoke, and stars that blinked but didn't shine. And somewhere in a corner he couldn't find, the blue sock waited. Segment 10. The Underbed Kingdom. The next morning, sunlight broke through the round attic window, casting long stripes across Nino's quilt. But there was no stretch or whisper from the socks. Only the red one lay curled at the foot of the bed like a sleeping pet, still, silent. Nino sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. "I have to find it," he said aloud, voice firmer than usual. And so, with a determined breath, he slid to the floor and knelt beside his bed. The space beneath had always been a place of forgotten toys, lost pencils, and rogue dust bunnies. But now it felt deeper, darker, as if the shadows underneath had thickened overnight. He lifted the bed skirt and peered in. Something glimmered faintly in the dark, not with light, but with the sense of memory. Nino took his flashlight from the nightstand and crawled in. The space stretched farther than it should have, more like a tunnel than the narrow strip he'd cleaned with his mother weeks ago. The floor was carpeted in mismatched buttons, single mittens, and marbles that rolled with no sound. A paper airplane with his name on it lay folded beside a toy he thought he'd lost last year. This wasn't just under his bed. This was the Underbed Kingdom, a place where forgotten things waited. And in the far distance, barely visible in the dusty twilight, something blue twitched. Nino's heart lifted. "I'm coming," he whispered. Then he crawled forward, into the kingdom of lost things. Segment 11. The Guardians of Dust and Thread. The air beneath the bed was thick with the scent of old crayons, pencil shavings, and the faint, comforting musk of wool. As Nino crawled deeper into the underbed kingdom, the tunnel widened into a cavern of forgotten treasures. Towers of board games, missing their lids, leaned beside hills of lone puzzle pieces. Dust motes danced like fireflies in the beam of his flashlight. Suddenly, something skittered across his path. Nino froze. From behind a lumpy pile of teddy bear stuffing emerged a curious figure no taller than a shoelace. It wore a coat sewn from a patch of old curtain and a hat made from a thimble. "Who goes there?" it squeaked, brandishing a tiny broom like a sword. Nino blinked. "I'm Nino. I'm looking for my sock. Blue, with a stitched star near the heel. It got lost last night." The tiny figure narrowed its button eyes. "You've entered the realm of the forgotten. This is no place for careless keepers." "I didn't mean to forget," Nino said quickly. I think it slipped away while I was dreaming." More figures stepped forward, some with shoes for helmets, others riding dust bunnies like noble steeds. They whispered among themselves, threads and ribbons tied around their waists like belts of honor. Finally, the first one spoke again. "The sock you seek was found near the dream drain. It wandered too far. We brought it back, but it hasn't spoken since." Nino's chest tightened. "Take me to it," he said. And with that, the Guardians of Dust and Thread began to lead him deeper into the kingdom, toward the blue sock and the silence it carried. Segment 12. The Chamber of Lost Voices. The journey through the underbed kingdom grew stranger the deeper Nino went. The Guardians marched ahead with quick, efficient steps, their tiny boots barely making a sound against the threadbare carpet of forgotten dreams. Nino followed closely, his flashlight casting long, flickering shadows against castles made of stacked books and cardboard drawbridges. They passed a valley of unmatched gloves waving limply in the draft, and a silent pond made from a spilled bottle of glitter, unmoved by time. Finally, they arrived. The Chamber of Lost Voices. It was a quiet dome-shaped hollow beneath the deepest slats of the bed, lit by the soft blue glow of forgotten nightlights. In the center, surrounded by gently humming spools of thread and blinking toy robots, lay the blue sock. Nino stepped forward, his breath caught in his throat. The sock looked smaller somehow, as if it had curled into itself. The wool had dulled. The soft twinkle it once carried, the sparkle of snow and quiet starlight, was gone. "I'm here," Nino whispered, kneeling. "I didn't mean to let you go." The sock didn't move. One of the Guardians, a tall figure with a ruler for a cane, stepped beside him. "Things don't disappear when they're lost," he said softly. "They wait. But waiting too long, it can dim even the brightest voice." Nino placed a hand over the sock, as gently as if holding a dream. "I want to listen," he whispered. "Will you tell me again? About the lake, about the sunrise?" There was silence, and then a faint warmth under his fingers. A single word, barely audible, like frost melting on a window pane. "Yes." Segment 13. The story rekindled. The warmth under Nino's palm deepened, spreading gently through his chest like hot cocoa on a cold day. The blue sock twitched ever so slightly, the threads along its edge shimmering faintly in the light of the old nightlights. Then softly, hesitantly, it spoke. It was early, still dark. The frost was thick across the ground. We stepped onto the frozen lake, and everything stopped. No wind, no sound, just the crackling silence of waiting. Nino closed his eyes. He could feel it again, the weightless hush, the pale sky brightening like breath on glass. The ice beneath us was clear. We saw fish sleeping. My person knelt and touched the surface, whispering something only the snow could hear. The sock's voice grew stronger, as if memory itself was sewing its edges back together. The sun came like a secret, not with trumpets, but like a whisper waking up a sleeping friend. I remember thinking if I never walked again, it would be enough. Nino listened, heart still. "I'm sorry," he said at last, "for letting you slip away." The blue sock gave a tiny stretch, like a smile in fabric form. "You found me. You listened again. That's what matters." The chamber of lost voices seemed to exhale. The toy robots blinked slower, more peacefully. A yo-yo retracted on its own. And somewhere far behind, a forgotten music box began to hum a single, delicate note. The sock, once silent, was now glowing faintly with that same snowy starlight it carried before. And Nino, holding it gently, knew exactly what to do next. Segment 14. The Journey Home. Nino turned to the guardians of dust and thread, his hand still wrapped around the now glowing blue sock. Their tiny eyes sparkled in the soft lamplight. "I'm ready to go home," he said quietly. The tall guardian with the ruler, Cain, gave a small bow. "Then we shall show you the way." Together, they retraced their steps through the winding paths of the underbed kingdom. As they passed the towers of forgotten toys and the sleeping mittens, Nino noticed the way everything seemed different now. Brighter, less lonely. The pond of spilled glitter shimmered with quiet joy. The paper airplane lifted on a gentle breeze and glided beside him, as if escorting him out. "Will I ever come back?" Nino asked the red sock on his foot. "You might," it replied, "when something else is lost, or when you need to be found." The guardians escorted him to the mouth of the tunnel, the soft curtain of blanket folds that marked the edge of his real-world bed. Before crawling through, Nino turned back. "Thank you," he said to the guardians, "for keeping the forgotten safe." A round little one with a dandelion crown nodded. "They aren't forgotten, child. Just waiting to be remembered." And with that, Nino slipped back under his bed. He emerged into his room with tousled hair and dust on his elbows. The morning sun was just rising, painting the wooden floor with honey gold stripes. He placed the blue sock gently on the bed beside the red one. Then he smiled. "I hear you." And both socks, warm, worn, and full of story, smiled back. Segment 15. Listening in the daylight. The attic room felt quieter now, not empty, but peaceful. Nino sat cross-legged on the quilt, both socks resting before him like tiny storytellers taking a well-earned nap. He didn't rush to put them away. Instead, he opened his notebook. On the first blank page, he wrote in slow, careful letters, "Stories my socks have told me." He drew a tiny tent for the circus, a mountain for the hike, a frozen lake with a rising sun, and beneath them, two socks, one red, one blue, smiling as if they too were remembering. That day at school, Nino didn't go straight to the edge of the playground. He wandered slowly, listening, not just to the shouts and stomps, but to what might lie underneath them. He saw Carlo again. Her shoelaces were neat today, double-knotted with care. He sat near her on the bench and said, "Do your shoes ever whisper?" She blinked. "What?" "Mine do," he said, then offered a small smile. "They remember where we've been." Carla giggled. "Mine probably only remember stepping on gum." "Even gum has a journey," Nino replied. They laughed. Later in class, Jude slid a crumpled paper toward Nino when the teacher wasn't looking. Inside was a drawing of two sock puppets, one with spiky hair, the other wearing a crown. "Guess which one's you?" Jude scribbled at the bottom. Nino grinned. That evening, as the sky turned lavender, Nino sat by his sock drawer, whispering softly to each pair. Some didn't reply, some did, but he listened to all of them. Segment 16. A Visit from the Button Moon. That night, with his newly reunited red and blue socks hugging his feet like old friends, Nino lay beneath his patchwork quilt, eyes wide in the dark. The whispers came early, softer now, like bedtime songs, but they carried something new, a shimmer of excitement. "The button moon is rising tonight," the red sock whispered. "The what?" Nino asked, sitting up just enough for the moonlight to kiss his cheek. "The button moon," the blue sock repeated. "A rare moon made of lost buttons, drifting across the sky only once in a blue sock's age. It listens to stories whispered from below and weaves them into dreams." Nino gasped softly. "Will it come here? If we're quiet? If we listen?" The room fell still. The wind hushed. Even the creaky pipe near the wall held its breath. And then light. Not the pale silver of the regular moon, but a dappled golden glow, spinning gently across the ceiling like a carousel made of thread and brass. Tiny shadows of buttons drifted across Nino's face as the button moon passed by his attic window, its surface glinting with loops and holes and colors that didn't exist during the day. Nino whispered, "I hope you find all the stories waiting for you." And the button moon shimmered, as if it understood. Then, slowly it floated on, gathering tales from rooftops, chimneys, and open windows across the world. Nino curled into his blanket, socks warm and still. And in his dream that night, he danced in a tent beneath the stars, across snow that sang beneath his feet. Segment 17. A gift for the waiting sock. Morning sunlight spilled into the attic like poured milk, soft and slow. Nino blinked sleepily and smiled. His dream still lingered, bright and strange. He had danced across a silver tightrope that stretched between snow-capped peaks, his socks whispering the rhythm beneath him. As he sat up, he remembered something. The waiting pile. In the sock drawer, folded carefully to one side, were the lonely singles, socks who had lost their pairs, who had never whispered, who waited quietly in shadows. Nino knelt beside them and lifted the green sock with the stitched moon near the toe. Still no voice. He held it gently. "I haven't forgotten you." He closed his eyes, pressing the sock softly to his cheek. "You don't have to have a partner to have a story. You already do." Then he did something new. From the shelf, Nino took an old button, a shiny green one from a coat he'd outgrown, and sewed it near the cuff of the sock with awkward, clumsy stitches. When he finished, he smiled at his work, uneven but full of care. "There," he whispered. "Now you've got a moon and a star." The sock didn't speak, but Nino imagined it sighing, maybe even smiling. Not all voices were loud. Some stories began with silence, with being held and remembered. He placed the green sock gently on the quilt beside the others. And for the first time, it looked like it belonged. Not because it matched, but because someone had made space for it. Segment 18. The Whispering Circle. That evening, the attic glowed with a soft golden light from Nino's bedside lamp. The room felt fuller than usual, not crowded, but warm, as if every object had gently edged a little closer. The socks, mismatched and mended, lined the edge of his bed in a careful arc. Nino sat in the center, cross-legged, notebook open on his lap. "I think it's time I told you a story," he said. The socks rustled quietly, a hush falling over the room. Even the wind seemed to still itself, curious. "It's about a boy who listened," Nino began, but didn't know what he was listening for. He told them everything. The circus leap, the frozen lake, the dusty kingdom, the quiet green sock. His voice was soft but sure, and as he spoke, the sock shimmered. Not with magic exactly, but with attention. They weren't just whispers now. They were listeners too. And then the boy understood. he finished. That listening wasn't about words. It was about care, about showing something or someone they matter. The blue sock wriggled gently beside the red. "That's a good story," it said. "It's your story," Nino replied. "No," the red sock chimed in. "It's ours." For a long time, they sat in the glow of the lamp, surrounded by silence that didn't feel empty at all. It felt shared, like a circle drawn not with chalk, but with trust. That night, Nino fell asleep with every sock in its place, and every sock listening back. Segment 19. A drawer that glowed. The next morning, Nino opened his sock drawer with the quiet reverence of someone unlocking a treasure chest. The inside no longer looked like a jumble of threads and colors. It looked like a gallery of tales. Each pair, or almost pair, sat folded neatly in tiny bundles, some with buttons stitched on lovingly, some with faint glimmers of thread where memories still lingered. The air around the drawer was different too, warmer, as if the drawer itself remembered being forgotten, and now glowed with quiet pride. He reached for 2 socks at random, one striped in orange and gray, the other pale yellow, with a tiny sewn-in sun. They didn't match, but that didn't matter. They both belonged. As Nino slipped them on, he heard a gentle whisper. "I was part of a camping trip once. My person roasted marshmallows and got chocolate on my toe. And I was worn during a dance recital," said the other. "She was so nervous. She tripped but still smiled." Nino laughed softly. "You're going to school with me today." He tucked his pants over his socks like usual, but inside, he carried the stories with him. Downstairs, his mother paused while pouring tea. "You're smiling more these days," she noted with a tilt of her head. "I think I'm hearing more," Nino replied. And though she didn't understand fully, she nodded and kissed the top of his head. Before walking out the door, Nino whispered to his drawer, "I'll be back. Keep the stories safe." And the drawer, he was sure, whispered back, "We always do." Segment 20. The boy who never stopped listening. Years passed as they always do. Nino grew taller, his hair darkened, his steps grew longer, but he still wore mismatched socks. Not just out of habit, but out of love, out of memory, and always, always out of listening. His attic room changed little. The quilt stayed on his bed, the round window still spilled moonlight on wooden floors, and the sock drawer, though older and squeakier, remained faithfully full of stories. Some socks had grown thin with time. Some had been patched or paired anew. Some had stopped whispering, not because they'd been forgotten, but because their stories had been fully told. And Nino? He had learned how to listen not just to socks, but to people. He listened to the tremble in a friend's laugh, the quiet in a stranger's eyes, the hope in a child's question. He grew into someone others came to, not because he always had the answers, but because he heard them, even when they couldn't find the words. One winter evening, many years later, Nino sat beside a child, his own daughter, wide-eyed and full of wonder. She had mismatched socks too. "They're talking," she whispered. Nino smiled. "They always do if you listen." And as she leaned in to hear the voice of her left sock, a sock passed down, blue with a stitched star and threadbare heel. The world felt exactly right. A circle completed. A whisper returned. A story always beginning. Nino and the Whispering Socks is a gentle reminder that every voice, no matter how small, quiet, or worn, holds a story worth hearing. Through his mismatched socks, Nino learns that listening isn't just about ears. It's about the heart. Whether it's an old sock, a classmate, or a lonely corner of the world, everything and everyone longs to be noticed, remembered, and understood. The story teaches us the value of presence. It encourages children to look beyond what's visible, to honor the hidden histories in ordinary things, to care for what seems forgotten, and to listen not just with curiosity, but with kindness. So tonight, before you close your eyes, listen closely to the rustle of your blanket, to the hush of the night, to the quietest part of your heart that still wonders and dreams. Because you, too, are full of stories, and someone somewhere is ready to listen. Good night, little dreamer. May your socks always whisper, and your heart always hear.